So before we get into the video, I have to ask this question. At what age did you see your first video, whatever it was, and learn about or hear about the Titanic? What age were you? I remember mine because it messed me up. I was in the third grade. The third grade when they showed us that old school video of the Titanic. And fam, when I tell you it messed me up, it messed me up. I was in the third. What age were y'all? And do you remember it? I think that's why I'm still fascinated with the Titanic till this day. Let's get to the video.
The RMS Titanic was once hailed as an unsinkable ship. That didn't go well, did it? The ship's journey was marked with eerie signs and mistakes that may have sealed its tragic fate. We all know the gist of what went down, but photos and footage from the wreckage continue to illuminate the horrifying truth. These are 20 mysterious moments captured in photos relating to the Titanic. Number 20. The Coal Fire. The story of the Titanic's sinking is often told through its ill-fated collision with an iceberg. However, another factor, a coal fire in one of its bunkers, may have played a pivotal role. The Titanic was on the verge of departure when a fire was discovered in one of its coal bunkers. This was no small incident, and crew members were aware of the blaze as the ship sailed from Belfast to Southampton. According to research...
Now, I thought about this when I was getting on a plane, right? And although I wasn't on a boat, it just made me think about this. How they were like, no, we're good to go, still push through, continue on, stay the course. Everything is going as planned. We're going to keep going. Instead of stopping and saying, maybe we shouldn't go, right? I was getting ready to get, I was on the plane. We were getting ready to take off and then something went wrong. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, snap. Should I just get off the plane now? Instead of trying to let them fix whatever they're trying to deal with and still continue on? I'm serious. I thought about that.
Researcher Senan Milani, this fire could have weakened the ship's structure, making it more vulnerable when the iceberg struck. Milani's research suggests the fire caused the steel hull to become brittle due to the heat, compromising its strength.
Intensity of the fire, and such as the effect on the steel and the robbing of the protective properties from the steel.
Supporting this theory, some photographs taken later show discoloration on the hull in the area where the iceberg made contact. The fire had been burning for around 10 days before the Titanic set sail, and it is believed to have continued throughout the voyage, while officials during the inquiry downplayed its importance. Some modern experts argue the fire's location and impact may not have been as influential as some theories suggest. Fires in coal bunkers were common in that era, and many ships experienced similar issues without disastrous results. Number 19. The crowd boarding the Titanic. Boarding the Titanic was an emotional moment, filled with anticipation for the adventure ahead, but also laden with poignant goodbyes. For some, it would be the final farewell, a somber reality when we consider the tragedy that followed. First-class passengers made up of the rich...
I ain't gonna lie, they also looked like they exceeded the fire code, bro. Like, it did look like it was way more on than should have been. But if you think about it, you look at it today with these cruise ships, man, if you see those sail away parties and all of those people, you be like, man, how are all these people on this ship?
Rich and famous, boarded in fine clothes. Women wore elegant gowns, tight corsets, and satin shoes, while men looked dashing in tuxedos and top hats. Among them were prominent American millionaires like John Jacob Astor and Benjamin Guggenheim, as well as socialites like Molly Brown. They were greeted with luxurious amenities and plush staterooms, indulging in lavish meals and impeccable service. In stark contrast, the third-class passengers were primarily working-class individuals or immigrants looking to start a new life in America. Their clothing was far simpler: long skirts and high-neck blouses for the women, and trousers and simple shirts for the men. Their living conditions on the ship were modest, far removed from the opulence enjoyed by the first-class travelers. Yet despite the differences, these passengers shared a sense of hope and optimism for the future. Many of them, particularly the Irish immigrants, were making their way to the United States in search of a better life. Sadly for many, the farewell they waved as they boarded was the last they would ever give. As the Titanic set sail, they had no idea their dreams would soon end in one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history. Which of these mysteries about the Titanic strikes you as the most unsettling? For me, the thought that the ship could have been cursed by a mummy is deeply chilling. Number 18. The Titanic's Twin. Here's a mysterious theory that surrounds the Titanic, a conspiracy claiming the ship was swapped with its sister, the RMS Britannic, as part of a grand insurance scam. The idea is as audacious as it sounds, suggesting the Britannic was deliberately sunk to allow the Titanic to survive, all while the owners profited from an insurance payout. The RMS Britannic was a larger and supposedly safer vessel, designed by the same White Star Line that built the Titanic. After the Titanic's sinking, the Britannic set sail, but skeptics argue that the two ships looked so alike that a switch could have been pulled off without much notice. Proponents of this theory suggest that the Titanic's demise was staged, and the Britannic was actually the ship that met its icy fate. The real Titanic, they claim, survived in secret, while the insurance payout was claimed from the loss of the other vessel. However, this theory doesn't quite hold up when we look at the facts.
Back and back. There's no stopping it.
In 1960,
I know, as outlandish as it sounds, we've heard crazier theories. So I just don't completely rule it out, even as crazy as that it may seem. Because at the end of the day, JFK, does that ring a bell? How outlandish does it sound? Exactly. But what are we finding out now? It's a lot of truth to it, right? So just don't completely shut down all of the possibilities and theories that come out about the Titanic.
The Britannic sank not due to an iceberg, but after hitting a mine in the Aegean Sea during World War I. The idea of a ship swap loses credibility, though conspiracy theorists continue to push this narrative. Despite the lack of hard evidence to support this theory, it persists because of its intriguing and sinister nature. Number 17. Father Francis Brown. Father Francis Brown, a Catholic priest, was an unlikely witness to the Titanic's final moments. In 1912, he received a first-class ticket for the Titanic's maiden voyage as a gift from his uncle, the Bishop of Cloyne. An avid amateur photographer, Brown brought along his Kodak camera and captured many historic moments aboard the ship, including photos of the luxurious interior and the ship's passengers and crew. Most notably, Brown took the only known images of Captain Edward John Smith inspecting lifeboats. These photos became the last known images of both the Titanic and several of its passengers, making them priceless historical artifacts. But Father Brown's story doesn't follow the typical narrative of Titanic passengers. Although he befriended an American couple who offered to fund his trip to New York, Brown was ultimately instructed by his Jesuit superior to disembark the ship in Queenstown. He obeyed the order and left the Titanic just before its doomed voyage continued. Miraculously, Brown survived the disaster, leaving behind an extraordinary photographic record of the ship.
Franciscus Brown died July 8th, 1960.
His photos offer a rare and poignant glimpse into the final days of the Titanic, immortalizing the ship in its prime moments, before it met its tragic end. Number 16. The sole Japanese survivor. Masabumi Hosono was the only Japanese passenger to survive the Titanic disaster, but his survival came with a heavy price. Born in Japan in 1870, Hosono was a journalist who had traveled to the United States for his studies. On his return journey to Japan, he found himself aboard the ill-fated ship. While many of his fellow passengers perished that night, Hosono managed to survive, but the consequences of his survival were far from comforting. When he returned to Japan, he was met with public scorn and criticism. In Japanese culture, self-sacrifice was highly valued, and it was considered dishonorable to save oneself at the expense of others, especially—
Then I wouldn't have went home. Go somewhere else. You were already headed somewhere else anyway. I wouldn't have went. If that's how y'all feel, nobody's happy that I survived. Y'all turning your nose up and looking down at me because I survived. Yeah. Then I ain't coming back here. What am I coming here for?
when women and children were involved. Hosono faced intense public backlash upon his return, and he was branded as a coward for escaping while so many others perished. His survival was seen as shameful, and he became the subject of national ridicule. Hosono's story was largely forgotten in the years that followed, and little is known about his life after the incident. The cultural expectations placed on him made his survival feel like a burden, and it's believed he lived with this stigma for the rest of his life, a tragic reminder of how different societies viewed life and death during that era. Number 15.
He was already probably dealing with some form of survivor's remorse, and now y'all just gonna pile on top of it? That's insane. That's why, see, people be saying, man, you don't know how good you have it where you live. And we complain about different things that's happening in our country, maybe your country. But look at what some other people deal with. Puts things into perspective, don't it?
15. The Goodwin family. The Goodwin family's story is one of the most heart-wrenching from the Titanic disaster. Frederick Goodwin, a 42-year-old signalman, and his 43-year-old wife, Augusta, were traveling with their 6 children, Lillian, Charles, William, Jesse, Harold, and baby Sydney, hoping for a better life in America. The family had dreams of starting fresh, but their hopes were dashed when the Titanic collided with an iceberg. In the chaos that followed, Augusta desperately tried to secure a spot for her entire family on one of the lifeboats. However, the rigid class divisions of the time meant that the Goodwins were separated during the evacuation. While Augusta and the children managed to board Lifeboat 10, Frederick was left behind as the ship sank. The family was torn apart in the most brutal way, as they faced the impossible choice of who would survive and who would perish. In the aftermath, the remaining Goodwin family members struggled to survive and live out the rest of their lives in poverty, haunted by the loss of their loved ones. Their tragic story serves as a painful reminder of how the Titanic's disaster affected not just individuals, but entire families, often leaving behind deep emotional scars that lasted for generations. Number 14. Titanic Shipyard number 390904. The Titanic's hull number 390904 may appear as a simple identifier, but conspiracy theorists have found something far more sinister hidden within it. Some believe that, when viewed in a mirror, the number spells out a shocking phrase, "No Pope." This unsettling theory centers around the largely Catholic workforce at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, where the Titanic was built. The belief is that some Protestant workers intentionally left this cryptic message, as a subtle act of defiance or mockery toward the Catholic majority. This theory caused significant unrest among workers, who reportedly halted production until the issue was addressed. While this claim seems far-fetched, its dark implications make it a compelling subject for conspiracy enthusiasts. However, the official history of the Titanic does not support this theory. The details surrounding its construction and design remain well documented, and there is no credible evidence to back up the claim of a hidden message in the hull number. Despite this, the theory continues to circulate, adding an eerie layer to the Titanic's already mysterious legacy. Number 13. The ship's third class. While the Titanic is often remembered for its luxurious first-class accommodations, the third-class passengers experienced a vastly different reality. First-class passengers enjoyed the finest things money could buy: lavish cabins, gourmet dining, and exclusive social spaces. For the wealthy, the Titanic was a symbol of opulence, offering a taste of luxury on the high seas. In contrast, third-class passengers, many of whom were immigrants hoping for a better life in America, had far less comfortable conditions. Though their cabins were relatively modest, they were still better than those on many other ships of the time. The third-class quarters, however, were located in the lower levels of the ship, far from the elegant surroundings of first class. These passengers faced cramped, noisy conditions, and their access to life-saving resources like lifeboats was severely limited. The rigid class separation on the ship became starkly apparent during the disaster. Many third-class passengers had trouble reaching lifeboats due to physical barriers, and their survival rate was much lower than that of the first-class passengers. The tragedy highlighted the social inequalities of the time, where the wealthier passengers had a better chance of survival, while those in third class faced overwhelming obstacles in trying to escape the sinking ship. Number 12. Titanic Sea Trials.
Could you imagine not having enough lifeboats, and the ones that they have are majority for the wealthy? Yeah, y'all better had those barriers in place. When it went down, when they realized it, y'all better had that in place, because it would have been a fight for them lifeboats. Y'all ain't just no. So it's because you got some money, your life is better than mine? No way. No way.
Sea trials are a critical part of a ship's readiness for its maiden voyage, and the Titanic's trials were no exception. Originally scheduled for April 1st, 1912, they were delayed due to poor weather conditions. This meant the Titanic had one less day in Southampton to prepare for its maiden voyage. On April 2nd, the ship finally set out for its trials, with a small skeleton crew aboard to assess its maneuverability and speed. However, several key personnel were absent, including Thomas Andrews from Harland and Wolff and representatives from the Board of Trade, who were crucial for certifying the Titanic's seaworthiness. The trials, which lasted about 12 hours, tested the ship's performance under limited conditions. The lack of a full crew and the absence of domestic staff meant that the ship wasn't tested under typical operating conditions. The most notable test, the crash stop, revealed that it took the Titanic about 850 yards to come to a complete stop from full speed, while the ship's top speed was recorded at 20 knots. These rush trials may have failed to provide a comprehensive understanding of the Titanic's capabilities. Looking back, this lack of thorough testing appears to be a key oversight that contributed to the Titanic's tragic end just days later. Number 11.
See, that makes me think about these new ships and the way they cranking them out now. Like, if you pay attention to Carnival, if that's something you frequent and take cruises on, you notice they got a new ship coming out a lot often. It's sort of like they putting them out way too fast. That's what's making me nervous about them. So maybe they're not doing the adequate safety testing on them and things like that before they putting these things out. Because the demand to take cruises is pretty much at an all-time high right now. So I feel like they're rushing these ships out. It's just something I've noticed lately. Every time you go on their website, it's a new one. And this one, there's a new one coming out. And it can go here and take you here. It's just starting to get out of hand.
11. J.P. Morgan's last-minute cancellation. J.P. Morgan, a name synonymous with financial power, was one of the most high-profile figures who canceled his ticket for the RMS Titanic's maiden voyage. His sudden decision to bow out has sparked many conspiracy theories over the years. Morgan, a financier and the head of the International Mercantile Marine Company, which owned both the Titanic and the White Star Line, had initially planned to board the ship. However, just before it was set to sail, Morgan mysteriously canceled his trip. At the time, it was explained as a personal decision, possibly related to health reasons, or a wish to extend his stay in France, where he was enjoying some leisure time. Yet, when the Titanic tragically sank, speculation emerged. Some suggest Morgan had prior knowledge of the ship's doomed fate, leading to a theory that he orchestrated the disaster as part of a larger financial scheme. The idea behind this claim is that Morgan intentionally eliminated rivals who opposed his vision for the creation of the Federal Reserve, which was being developed at the time. Another, even more far-fetched theory suggests that Morgan was inspired by a novel written in 1898, Futility, by Morgan Robertson. The book eerily mirrors the Titanic disaster, and some conspiracy theorists wonder if Morgan took inspiration from it. Though these theories remain speculative, they continue to intrigue those looking for hidden motives behind the Titanic tragedy. Now it's time for the sweet topic. When exploring the wreckage of the Titanic, deep-sea explorers found a camera, and with the camera was a photo. It is an image that was snapped not pre or post the sinking of the ship, but quite literally during the sinking of the ship. It's truly chilling to see a woman, quite literally, in the midst of drowning, revealing the true horror of the Titanic incident for all. As always, let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below using the hashtag #SweetTopic. Number 10. The ship that watched the Titanic sink. On the night the Titanic met its tragic end, a ship called the SS Californian was within striking distance, yet it failed to respond to distress signals. This vessel, operated by the British Leyland Line, was just a few miles away when the Titanic collided with the iceberg. Despite being in range, the Californian did nothing, leaving many to wonder why no action was taken. Interestingly, before the collision, the Californian had already sent a warning about ice fields in the area, but this message never reached Captain Edward Smith of the Titanic. The reason? The Titanic's radio operator, Jack Phillips, was too busy with passenger messages to prioritize the warning, which didn't carry the urgency required to grab attention. Even after the Titanic struck the iceberg and began sinking, the Californian had a chance to help. The crew aboard the Californian saw the Titanic's distress rockets, yet Captain Stanley Lord took no action. A carpenter...
I think this is one of the things that keeps the Titanic like at the forefront of everybody's mind, keeps them researching it, keeps them wanting to go back, and it's just so many factors that contributed to it going down, to it sinking ultimately. It wasn't just the iceberg. It was things leading up to it. It was things during the cruise. It was things that happened right before. It was like so many different factors that like contributed to it going down. And now they can research even more with that 3D. You see that 3D mock-up they got just here recently they put out? They really can dive into it and get more information about it. So I don't think we'll ever stop talking about the Titanic.
On board claimed he witnessed both the sinking ship and the distress signals. However, by this time, the Californian's radio operator had gone off duty and the crew did not respond. Investigations following the disaster suggested that had the Californian intervened, many lives could have been saved. Despite facing severe criticism for his inaction, Captain Lord was never formally charged. The Californian itself met a tragic fate 3 years later, when it was sunk by a German submarine during World War I. Ironically, its failure to act that night contributed to the legacy of disaster. Number 9. The Musicians of the Titanic. A particularly moving aspect of the Titanic disaster was the courage shown by the ship's orchestra. Comprising 8 talented musicians led by Wallace Henry Hartley, the orchestra continued to play soothing music even as the ship sank into the icy depths of the Atlantic. Hartley, an accomplished violinist, was revered for his leadership and musical skill, and his tragic death became symbolic of the ship's doomed voyage. When the wreck was discovered, Hartley's violin was recovered, becoming one of the most iconic and valuable items found from the Titanic's remains. Hartley's funeral in his hometown of Colne, Lancashire, was attended by thousands of mourners who honored his bravery. The orchestra included musicians such as Scottish violinist John Law Hume and Paris-born Georges Alexandre Crins. Also part of the group were Percy Cornelius Taylor, who played both the piano and cello, and cellist John Wesley Woodward. Their role during the sinking has become part of Titanic lore, with many survivors recalling their final performance. Though there are conflicting reports.
I can't believe that actually happened. Like, I thought that was just all like extra theatrics that they added to the movie to make it more entertaining, to see them play as the ship went down. But to hear that actually took place, I'm not a fan. I don't like that. I don't like that, bro. No, why not try to save yourself? I get it. It doesn't look possible, but that to me seems like giving up. Y'all may look at it different, but to me, it just seems like you just gave up. Ah, no, we're not doing that.
On the last song they played, it is widely believed that they played "Nearer My God to Thee," a hymn that offered comfort in the face of certain death. Their steadfast devotion to music during the ship's final moments remains one of the most poignant elements of the Titanic's tragic story. Number 8. The misleading title. The Titanic is often remembered as the unsinkable ship, a title that has only served to emphasize the tragedy of its sinking. While the ship's supposed unsinkability was a popular notion, it's important to note that this label was never officially used by the White Star Line before the disaster. In fact, prior to the Titanic's ill-fated voyage, only a handful of trade publications described the ship as practically unsinkable. Ironically, after the Titanic sank, the term became synonymous with the ship's tragic end, casting a dark shadow over its reputation. The Titanic's supposed invincibility has long been the subject of ridicule, especially in light of the ship's catastrophic failure to live up to its name. The phrase unsinkable was based on the ship's advanced design and safety features, yet it ultimately proved to be a false sense of security. In the end, This mislabeling became a bitter irony, as the Titanic, like many ships before and after it, was vulnerable to the forces of nature. The idea of an unsinkable ship now serves as a cautionary tale about human arrogance and the limits of technology.
Let me ever hear somebody talking about, oh, come get on this unsinkable ship with me. Nope. Nope. No. Absolutely not. And I advise you not to go on it now that you've said that, or they deemed it that. If they call it that, I will never be on it or around it. No, thank you. No, thank you. But you know, history is deemed to repeat itself. Somebody's going to be bold and cocky and label some ship coming out as the unsinkable ship. I advise y'all to stay away from it.
Number 7. The Unsinkable Stewardess. Violet Jessup's story is one of remarkable survival, considering the string of maritime disasters she was involved in. Born in Argentina to Irish immigrants, Jessup's career in the maritime world began as a nurse aboard the RMS Olympic, Titanic's sister ship. In 1911, Jessup was on the Olympic when it collided with the HMS Hawke. The Olympic was severely damaged, but was able to return to port, and Jessup's calm demeanor during the ordeal earned her respect. You might think that after such a harrowing experience, Jessup would have chosen a safer career path. However, she returned to sea aboard the RMS Titanic in 1912. That fateful night, Jessup was in bed after finishing her prayers when the Titanic struck the iceberg. Initially, she thought it was a drill, unable to believe the ship that was supposed to be unsinkable could be in danger. However, within hours, she found herself aboard a lifeboat, witnessing the Titanic disappear beneath the waves. Miraculously, Jessup survived once again, just as she had on the Olympic. Her experiences made her a symbol of resilience in the face of disaster, and her extraordinary ability to persevere through life-threatening situations has cemented her place in Titanic history. Number 6. The ship's good luck charm. On board the Titanic was Jenny, a ship cat often seen roaming freely across the vessel. Jenny was more than just a cute animal. She was the ship's official rat catcher, a vital role for a large ocean liner like the Titanic. Cats like Jenny were common on ships in those days, helping keep the rat population in check. It's said that she was considered a good luck charm by the crew, as her presence helped maintain a sense of peace and order on board. There's little evidence to confirm what happened to her after the Titanic struck the iceberg, but some believe she perished alongside the passengers. Others, however, tell a different story.
I was about to say, I'm not quick to think that a cat just died. If anything survived off that boat, it's probably that cat. It definitely got onto one of those life rafts. You have to show me the body in order for me to think the cat didn't get to safety. Yeah, no. Those jokers are way too smart.
Legend has it that Jenny may have foreseen the disaster. According to some, Jenny gave birth to kittens shortly before the ship's fateful voyage. In a strange twist, she allegedly took her kittens off the ship while the Titanic docked in Southampton, making people wonder if she somehow knew what was coming. One of the Titanic stokers, Joseph Mulholland, who cared for Jenny and her litter, claimed that after witnessing this strange behavior, he decided to abandon his plans to board the ship, believing that the cat's actions were a sign of impending doom. While this remains more of a legend than a verified fact, it adds to the mystery of the Titanic story, with Jenny's fate still unknown and steeped in speculation. Number 5. Lifeboats on board. Before the Titanic ever set sail on its doomed journey, there were already concerns about the insufficient number of lifeboats on board. The ship carried only 20 lifeboats, far too few to accommodate the 2,200 passengers and crew. In fact, the lifeboats were only meant to hold around half of the people on board, which in itself was a glaring oversight. The Titanic was originally designed to carry 32 lifeboats, a number that would have comfortably fit the ship's total capacity. However, the design was altered to cut the number down to 20, as the ship's builders and owners thought the decks might appear overcrowded. This decision was in line with the outdated maritime laws of the time, which were based on cargo capacity, not passenger numbers. When disaster struck, the lifeboats were launched, but they were far from full. Many of them left the ship with far fewer passengers than they could hold, as people didn't yet grasp the severity of the situation. The lifeboats, which should have been a lifeline, were launched inefficiently, and it took over an hour to send off all 16 lifeboats. Even more tragic is the fact that all the lifeboat drills had been canceled prior to the voyage, leaving the crew unprepared for the panic and chaos that would follow. The lack of sufficient lifeboats and the slow response time contributed to the immense loss of life. Number 4. Mummy's Curse. One of the more unsettling tales connected to the Titanic involves a mysterious artifact known as the Unlucky Mummy. This object, a painted wooden mummy board or coffin lid from ancient Egypt, was said to have been part of the cargo on the Titanic's maiden voyage. The mummy board, which dates back to the 21st or 22nd dynasty, was discovered in Thebes and is now housed in the British Museum. But what makes this artifact so eerie is the story that surrounds it. It is believed to have once belonged to a high-ranking woman who took part in temple music rituals, a relic with an aura of mystery. Legend has it that this mummy board brought bad luck to the Titanic, and some even suggest that it played a role in the ship's tragic sinking. The artifact was one of the many items aboard the Titanic when it set sail in April 1912, and it was said to carry a curse. Some believe the mummy's spirit was angry, resulting in the ship's ill fate. While these stories are based on folklore and superstition, the curse narrative still lingers among those fascinated by the Titanic's mysteries. Whether or not the mummy truly had anything to do with the sinking remains a mystery, but its ominous presence on board adds to the ship's already dark legacy. Number 3. David Blair and the Missing Binoculars. A small but critical detail in the Titanic disaster was the absence of binoculars for the ship's lookouts. In the days leading up to the voyage, David Blair, who was initially assigned as the Titanic's second officer, was reassigned to a different ship. In the chaos of the change, Blair mistakenly took the key to the crow's nest locker, where the binoculars were kept, with him. This seemingly insignificant error would later be cited as a key factor in the ship's failure to spot the iceberg in time. The absence of binoculars meant that the lookouts had to rely on their unaided eyes to scan the icy waters, a major disadvantage given the low visibility that night. Some reports suggest that the locker was later found unlocked but empty, fueling further speculation that Blair's mistake might have contributed to the disaster. This lack of
I wonder if knowing that, did they cut back on their speed? Because you would think if we don't have the binoculars to see far ahead of us and there's low visibility, we should actually slow down to possibly a crawl at this point. But knowing people in there in a rush to get to a destination on time as promised probably didn't. But you would think, okay, can't see until visibility gets better, we slow down to a crawl. That way, if we see something too late, we got time to get by it or make an adjustment. Like, I don't understand that.
Proper equipment could have made a difference, allowing the lookouts to spot the iceberg earlier and possibly avoid the collision. While we'll never know if the presence of binoculars could have saved the ship, the error remains a focal point in the investigation of the Titanic's tragic end. Number 2. Near collision in Southampton. Before the Titanic even set sail, a near-disastrous incident occurred in Southampton. On April 10, 1912, as the Titanic prepared to depart for its maiden voyage, the ship's massive size caused an unexpected problem. As the Titanic passed by the SS New York, which was docked next to the Oceanic, the force of the Titanic's propellers caused the New York to become dislodged from its berth. This caused the New York to drift dangerously close to the Titanic, creating a real risk of collision. Quick action from Captain Smith, along with help from the tugboat Vulcan and pilot George Boyer, prevented what could have been a catastrophic event right before the Titanic even left port. Despite the close call, the incident added a sense of foreboding to the Titanic's journey. Some saw this as an early sign of bad luck, an omen that something was not quite right. Fortunately, the collision was avoided, but the situation raised concerns among some observers. The near disaster delayed the Titanic's departure, but it did nothing to stop the ship from heading straight into the history books. Number 1. The Dogs of Titanic. The Titanic was home to several first-class passengers who brought their beloved pets along for the journey. On board the ship were 12 dogs, most of them pampered members of the wealthy families traveling in first class. The dogs on board represented the lavish lifestyle of the ship's elite passengers. These dogs included purebreds like an Airedale named Kitty, a Pekingese named Sun Yat-sen, and a Pomeranian named Lady, among others. They were kept in the ship's first-class cabins or well-appointed kennels on the deck where they were regularly walked by the staff. While the dogs' lives were cushioned by luxury, their fates were tied to the disaster that unfolded. When the Titanic sank, the smaller dogs were able to find refuge in the lifeboats, with 2 Pomeranians and the Pekingese Sun Yat-sen surviving. However, the larger dogs were not as fortunate. The owners of the smaller dogs were able to smuggle them onto lifeboats, while the larger animals, unable to fit or be quickly carried, did not survive. The dog's fate was a poignant reminder of the chaos and heartbreak that gripped the ship as it sank. Interestingly, there was even a planned informal dog show for the 15th of April, but of course it never took place due to the tragic events that overtook the Titanic.